Bismillah just means in the name of God. And I'm going to ask, I know that we're post-lunch, it's warm out, right? And so I'm going to ask that you try to be as present as possible. And again, as we said on, he's already laughing. As I said on the online meeting, that this is also a course about who we are as human beings, right? With all of our strengths and limitations and growth edges and, ways that we're still striving to improve on who we are. So I am certainly not expecting perfection. Right? It is something that I have to be very transparent. I've struggled with all my life, right? Who knows what my name means? Kameelah. And there's another sort of translation of that, which is one who strives for perfection, right? So I said, thanks, Grandma. And it took me a long time to really kind of hone in on the word strive, right? I thought, okay, if I do something, it has to be 110% at all times, right? That I can't do anything less than that. And that is impossible, right? And so I had to come to a place of recognizing that the striving is about intention. It is about what can I do in some small way each day, right? In order to be more fully present, because each moment that we're in is the only moment that we're in. Okay, and so making use of this time that we have together is not just learning from me, but is learning from you all. And so paying attention to what's being shared, what's not being said, right? The things that go unspoken, right? Who speaks those things and when. And so it's not just sort of paying attention to my voice, but to the voices of everyone in this room. Okay, so I wanted to just sort of preface that with trying to be as present and knowing that it's the afternoon and you've eaten lunch and you may be winding down sort of depending on your own sort of personal rhythm, right? Who's a morning person? Raise your hand. Okay, I'm not raising my hand, that's not me. I'm a night owl and I'm married to a morning person. So our 8 a.m. discussions are very interesting. Right? He's like, good morning, Salam alaikum. I'm like, oh, you gotta bring it down just a little bit. So we're all at very different sort of rhythms in the day. And so if you see or feel your mind starting to wander a bit, just kind of bring it gently back to the room. And then you're here again, right? And that process may happen throughout the hours that we are together. All right, so I am going to set out an agenda for each morning or afternoon. This is, again, sort of a guideline. We might not get to all of these things. We might sort of linger at different points of the agenda, but this is also just to kind of give you an idea of what to expect each day, okay? Again, everybody's different. Some people really like this. Some people are like, oh, okay, it doesn't matter to me. But we're trying to accommodate, again, everyone in the room, right? And so we're going to go over these guiding principles and just a few words about the reflection papers, the cycle of socialization and liberation, thinking about personal identity. And this sort of second piece here is really meant to provide a context, right? So understanding power and privilege, oppression, how that impacts who we are, the world that we're in, especially now. Thinking about targeted identities, those identities where you might have more advantages or privileges than others, right? So these are all of the things that we're going to discuss. We're going to take a break at around 4 o'clock. Again, this is depending on where we get to sort of in the discussion, but also feel free to listen to your body and what it needs. If you need to kind of stand up and walk around, please feel free to do so. And then we're going to get into some family of origin and genogram work, okay? So before we proceed, I want everybody to stand up. And some of you have already done it. Take a really deep breath in. Stretch if you need to. Listen to what your body might need in this moment. Feel the feelings that may have come up as you share, as you listen, as you take it all in. Okay, so I want you to think about the place and the moment that you are in. And I do believe that God, higher power, however that feels for you and your tradition, has placed us in this room together for a very particular reason and with a purpose. And so when we are here together, I think it's always important to bear in mind that the connections that may come of the stories that we share and the things that we discover together are all for some purpose that may not unfold for us in this moment. But in the future, inshallah, it could be in another generation. We don't know. But my father always says, everything happens as it should. Right? So all of those who are here in this room, whether physically present or through Zoom, we're all here for a reason. Right? And so it's our job to be open to discovering what that reason might be. Okay? So I want us all to take another deep breath in and audibly exhale. Okay. Have a seat. So the reason that I enjoy doing that kind of introduction, right, because we can go through the material and what's up next and what's on the agenda, is that there's so many stories in this room, right? Everything that everyone shared, you're thinking about, you're making these decisions like, well, what should I say? What's important? What feels relevant, right? What do I think is interesting? What do I want to share? No, can't share that. That's too much, right? So as we make those decisions in the moment so very quickly, right? When I'm listening, I'm like, right, there's so much more, right? And so as you open up your heart to yourself first, right? And then to other people in the room to really, be present and understand what everyone is bringing, right? The richness, the depth, the history, right? The stories, right? This is why the self-care and self-development is so important, right? Because yes, we can read your bios and they're all impressive, right? They all have something of value and of benefit to many, many communities and individuals, right? But how often do you get to sit, right, and learn, who am I really, right? What do I enjoy, right? What's something that it really resonates with me as fundamental to who I am, but I hardly share it, right? And so there are so many aspects of who we are that kind of get closed in, right? We build up these walls. Some of them have doors that lock. We don't open them, right? And so while there are places that you're like, I'm an open book. I love to help people and I want to be of service and, I want to get to know others, right? There are also people who are like, I want to get to know you, right? Who are you, this unique individual? What has brought you? All of these experiences have brought you to this moment. I mean, think about it. There's so many moments that have brought us here, right? So when do we get to reflect on how all of those things, some people call it like a butterfly effect or serendipity or coincidence, divine intervention, right? All of those things have brought us here, right? So as we go around the room and we listen, right? Were there certain things that stood out to you and you thought, I would love to hear more about that story, right? What does that mean, right? How did that make you who you are, right? Did you all hear some of that? Right? And so as we become open to what those stories might mean and all of the feelings that come along with it, right? So if something comes up, it's here, right? Don't deny the feeling entry at the door. Be like, oh, you don't belong here, sadness. You don't belong here, anger, right? You don't belong here, pain, right? It's all supposed to be here in this room, right? Because otherwise, there's so many other parts of you that get cut off in the service of you saying, nope, that's not allowed, right? Yeah. And so what deepens your work is the vulnerability, right? It's scary, it's risky, right? It hurts, but it makes you so much more of an alive, rich person that people will be drawn to those stories that you have to share, right? I want to know who you are, not just what you do, okay? And so as we get as more of those stories unfold, right, it's kind of like, what is it called, the dolls that are inside? What is it?
The nesting dolls, right?
Yes, right? That's what it's like, right? Or you start to bloom in a way, right? How many people, I think someone said they like being, few of you said you like being in nature, you like traveling, right? And so one of the joys for me is being in places where you can see like the color start to come out, right? I mean, I love being from the East Coast, right? Half of my family is West Indian, right? We're from this tiny little island, Nevis, right? And going there, I'm like, we have mountains, we have the Caribbean Sea, we have the Atlantic Ocean, we have all this green, right? And then you go back to Philadelphia, right? But when you start to see things come alive, right? Birth is painful, right? Discovery is painful, but there's so many rewards on the other side of it, right? That you have to be grateful for the pain that gets you to the other side, right? How else will you know, okay? And so in our sort of commitment to that discovery, there are some agreements that I want us to be mindful of. And Mohammed, I will send you the things that I'm passing around so you have them as well. Okay. So how are we doing? So what you all have now is the 4 agreements of courageous conversations, and we'll go through that. But first, I want to go through these lists of, you know, I really shy away from using words like rules, right? Because it just sounds so formal and rigid. So what I use is like guiding principles, right? These communal agreements, right? So every day that we're here together, we're building community, right? And so we have an opportunity to be really intentional about how we want this community to look, to feel, what we want it to accomplish, okay? And so there's a professor by the name of Anna Louise Keating, and I really appreciate these principles that she has come up with as sort of like foundational, okay? So social injustice exists, fact, period, right? Our educations have been biased, right? And educations in many forms, right? Formal classroom knowledge, the things that we know about other people, right? And so this, I think it was Fuad that mentioned kind of just intellectual sort of understanding. There's what's called epistemology, right? Like, how do you know what you know, right? And how do you know what you know? Based on the person you are, right? There are things that I know as a Black woman, as a Muslim woman, right? Someone who was born in Brooklyn, right? A descendant of enslaved people in the US and the Caribbean, right? There are things that I know because of the body that I'm in, right? But our educations are often biased, what? In favor of knowledge and wisdom and understandings of those who are more privileged, right? And so we all come with wisdom, but there are some wisdoms that are cut off and deemed irrelevant, right? So we want to invite all of that into the room. Blame is not useful, but accountability is, right? And so as we share our stories, there may be things that come up that may feel very uncomfortable, right? And you may think, well, how is that possible, right? Or how could you not know this? Or how is it that this is something that's new, that has been present with me my entire life, okay? So if we go back to the fact that our educations are biased, that means that there is something that we all don't know about, right? And so we're here to learn what that might be. We are all related to all that lives. I think that's beautiful, right? I have a 16-year-old, a 14-year-old, and a 3-year-old. And over the course of the week, maybe you'll get the story about how that happened. But I was walking down the street with my son. Sometimes, you know, he has a hard time falling asleep, so we'll just walk around the block. And every few seconds he would stop. He's like, "Mommy, no, 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 no." And I'm tired. I'm like, I'm tired. I'm ready to go to bed. And he's like, it's the ant, right? And he's like, we have to stop. We have to wait for the ant, right, to do what it has to do, right? And then like every few steps, he's like, wait. It's a bug, right? And I thought, just the wonder, right, of a child, right? Because how many of us were like, I got someplace to be. And you may not make it to where you need to be, but I have someplace to go, right? And so knowing that we are related to all that lives, again, draws from like an ancient wisdom, right? That sort of ancestral knowledge that we have about our connections to everything, right? Which then helps develop a connection to the Creator. Categories and labels shape our perceptions, right? How instantly, and this is partly how we develop cognitively, right? Is that it's easier for us to say, okay, I need to create a shortcut, right? So I need to put you here, right? And then there are some rules about what it means for you to be there, right? So sometimes what kind of piques our curiosity is when we hear someone share a story about where they're not supposed to be, right? So how is it that you are both Italian and Pakistani, right? I'm sure people are like, wait, my mind is having a hard time, right? And so we want to be even more curious, right, about why that's pushing the boundaries of some of the categories that we've created about people, right? People have a basic goodness, right? In Islam, we call it the fitra, right? We're born open and willing and receptive, right? And often it's our educations that change that, okay? And so when we think about all of those other presuppositions, we want to move into deep listening, right? Respect for each speaker's personhood, willingness to be vulnerable, asking for clarification, right? And not in an accusatory way, but again, it's listening to, there's so much more story here, and I want to hear it, okay? So what's the question that I might ask to invite the storyteller to share that with me, okay? Frequent pauses and the ability to remain silent. I'm a therapist, so I can sit with silence for a long time, right? And just be curious about what it means, right? And if you are someone who is more introverted, right, you need pauses, right? I'm an extrovert with a lot of introvert friends, so they've taught me. Sometimes they're like, quiet, right? And I appreciate that, right? Just that ability to pause, to slow down, right? To think about, well, what is happening for me as I listen to you, right? Because often when we're responding from the places that are activated within us, okay? And then again, challenge the ideas, not the speaker, right? And if you've agreed with all of these, right, then you're wondering like, well, how is it that those are the categories that you've kind of taken as core beliefs, right? How is it that the way that you have been educated perhaps have omitted the person that I am, right? So how do I share that with you, okay? Anything here that stands out, that resonates, that you might be curious about?
By blame is not useful, but accountability is.
Mm-hmm.
Is that self-accountability or accountability in general as a principle?
Well, what do you all think?
I'll say self-accountability.
Mm-hmm.
Easy to blame someone else about whatever went wrong. Kind of look at yourself. How did you play a part?
Right.
In that.
Right. And this is hard, right? It's hard to do because if you believe that, again, we are all related to all that lives, right? We live in systems, right? So as you change, and again, something that I think I can say with some certainty is that as you change and deepen your own practice of self-reflection, right, it will cause some ripples, right? Because now you're like, I'm curious about myself, and now I'm curious about you. And I'm curious about how we relate to one another, right? And so as you begin to ask more questions, it might prick some folks, right? They're like, oh, mind your business. Why do you want to know that, right? What does that mean, right? And so there's always the dance that we're doing with everything that's living, right? So as we discover more, right, it sort of might push against, again, the categories, the labels, right? And so when there is blame about what that means, right, it sort of forecloses the possibility of learning, right? So accountability is, well, how do I take responsibility for my biased education, for my sort of categories and labels? How do I take responsibility for that? And then I'm open to how that might be true for someone else, okay?